Spanish. Okay, I think that goes a long way. Simple phrases, simple phrases. It goes a long way in establishing that rapport. They feel they're not under a lot of pressure, and they see you meeting halfway, so they're like this, plus, they might know you can't get one buy on them. They're like this. Oh, 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 you understand? So su comprende. Oh, so that's when you're like, okay. But I love the Spanish language because you can understand Italian, a little Portuguese, stuff like that. So I've been really back on my Spanish, getting it back because I got that gut of New York type of Spanish, and then you go to school, you learn proper Spanish, and then you go to another country and they don't speak, or the dialect's different. So you have to pick up on it because the syntax is a little different and what have you. So I just try to learn my basics again and stuff like that. I can have a conversation, but when I go out to a call and everything, I just brush up and make sure I'm saying the words in the order it's supposed to be saying. They get the message real quick, okay? So again, let's go over a few things. So we got that, we got that, we got that. I'm gonna go down my page real quick because, all right, we talked about that. We don't worry about that. Okay, evidence, evidence forms and impoundment forms. Easy to see, cage cards, easy to read. If you have an accident circumstances, impoundment form, that's saying you had to remove the animal, you didn't have time to get a warrant, okay? Field inspection reports. So for you managers, supervisors, and stuff like that, to keep your guys accountable, there's a few forms I'll go over. Where's it at? Let me go back at the top. So there is a acknowledgement of receipt and acknowledgement of employee manual. So I used to have my guys in for roll call every day, and then we would have in-service training. So about 3 times a year on both shifts. You always want to have a receipt where they got this information and have a sign in, because when they do something wrong, I'm sorry, you have to hold them accountable for when it was taught, and you have the receipt. Okay, you give them a copy, you have a copy in computer, and what have you. And let me go back where I was. Inspection. So I feel, and just me, okay, it's upon the field training officer, field supervisor, or field manager to keep the people accountable. You just have an inspection report. Now, usually, no, my old supervisor, he would say, okay, we're going to have inspections and get you on point and let you know, okay? I didn't do that. All right, I didn't do that. I had my roll calls, and y'all guys, some of y'all know, because some of y'all listen. My guys were like every morning roll call, and you get the chit chat out the way and everything, and then we talk about the first thing. So how everybody's doing? First thing I ask, we got anything from yesterday I need to know, okay? Because you can have a brain fart, forgot to put in your notes. It happens. You can get late on a call or forgot to do a follow. Something you could just forgot. Okay, it's not the end of the world. So now that you remember, you bring it up to date. We all get caught up, and I just look at you like you're crazy. And I keep it moving. And then I always say, does anybody need to add? Anybody have anything? That's a time for, to inspire. That's the time where the officer might have a good idea about whatever. And they say it out their mouth. So now, don't get me wrong. Some stuff I'll be like this, oh, your ass crazy. And other stuff I'll be like, that's a good idea. Yeah, let me run that up the chain and let's try it out. I'm all for new things to make things easier, simple, and make sure everybody's on board. I do not like to work hard. I don't mind hard work, but I do not like to work hard. I like to work in a constant flow to get the job done and achieve the goal. I think that would be everybody's concept, but sometimes it's not like that. So during roll call, after the calls, disseminated and whatever like that, my OIC, officer in charge, would take over. Or sometimes my OIC would just do the whole thing. I learned how to delegate in my latter years of being a supervisor. You don't have to be holding hands or micromanaging. One thing I learned, people like to be left on their own to do it. Now, if you have to keep somebody close, that means they need to be retrained. And retrain to they got it and know it, and then you give them a cheat sheet, so they have to keep coming back to you about the stuff they should know that they was already taught. Know what I mean? That they signed for on whatever that date and got that receipt from. Know what I mean? So what you try to do is empower your people with all the paperwork they need. Have a checklist to guide them through it, so you don't have to be like this. You remember how we talked about that? You don't even have to do that. It's like this checklist with the paperwork in a folder. Holler back and give them the area where you leave the paperwork, and make sure the supervisors what check the paperwork. This is an easy chain, okay? And it's not that deep where you have to be like, let me check that person's work, or let me do it. You're gonna check everybody's work, but there's no pressure on them because they're like, oh, they're confident in their skills. They're confident in what they can do. A good supervisor doesn't have to micromanage. They need to coach. All right. And you have to remember, you're understanding how to deal with people's personalities. All right. And that's the biggest thing I learned being supervision, personalities. You have complainers. Now, the thing about complaining, I was shown by one of my mentors. He says, do not come in my office if you don't have the answer. Don't come to me bitching and complaining about something if you don't have a recommended idea on how to resolve it. Because some people like to bitch and moan. People like to say, walk, Charlie Brown. And you're like, okay, so what do you think we should do about that? And it's stuck like Chuck. They're like, yeah. I'm like, yeah, get your ass out of my office, okay? But if you come with something I neglected to see, one of my team neglected to see, and you have a real problem here, you're perturbed with it, you're like, yo, this is a problem. Okay. People say my door is always open. My door is not always open. You can always come in my damn office. But I'm like, hey, what's up? Hey, Soup, or whatever they call me at that time. Hey, I got this and stuff like that. And sometimes it's the tone and approach that an officer can come in and talk to his supervisor. I don't get bent out of shape. I just don't. I'm mature now. This was not me 15 years ago. If you come at me right, off with your head. Now I'm like, whatever, dude. It's just not that deep. But if you come, I don't talk about being meek. You can be upset about something. I understand it's not toward me. It's not personal. You're upset about the situation, and you come to me out of frustration. I'm like, all right, it's my job to try to help you figure this out. So okay, let's stand up and talk. You want to take a walk? We need to do over lunch. How do we need to see what the problem is and then fix it? Some people make it way deeper than it has to be. But first of all, is it fixable, whatever the problem is? And can I do it, myself alone? Or do I have to go up the chain? Okay? And that's one thing you have to explain to whoever's coming to you. Because with paperwork, I think it diffuses a lot of things because they're like, well, I don't stand on that. Well, I said back when, either in the academy or in service, we kind of went over stuff like this, like that. Maybe you forgot. Let me refresh you. All right, just a little bit. And point to whatever paperwork or whatever in the SOP like that, because you might not know, or you might be just frustrated and misremembering. It happens, okay? But always take into account that whatever they're saying is genuine, and they come in with a problem that is serious to them. And it might not be that serious in life, but it's serious to them at that time. So that's when you put on your coach whistle, and you say, okay, you clap and everything, and you say, all right, bring it in. All right, what you got? And then you try to help them. You know what I'm saying? I usually go back to the paperwork and what's been taught. That's how I was taught. We had a supervisor who was basically a teacher. All right, and we locked head. Oh my God, we locked head. I was had a big ego. Come from New York, couldn't tell me nothing. I mean, he still can't tell me nothing with some things. I'm open to a lot now. Okay, I've grown up, but it was his delivery. I give him credit. He's like, basically, you knew he was in charge, and it was like a downhill. There was open conversation. I didn't like it. It was open conversation with a few things, but it was still going to be SOP way. There was no can change it or update the SOP. That came a lot later, which ushered me into uh, um, doing presentations and teaching in the academy. All right, which I still love today. So another piece of paperwork a lot of people don't like doing is disciplinary action forms and discipline. So there's a method here. So I use this not to punish anybody, but to keep you accountable for the contract that you signed. And I say this in some of my classes, and I'll say it to anybody. Usually you're not misled when you take a job. You're not misled. You saw it advertised, you read about it, you agreed to be interviewed about it, you were interviewed, and you accepted the position that it's all spelled out to you. Okay? Now, don't get me wrong. It might be disingenuous, okay? Because half the stuff that's posted in a job listing, you're kind of not going to do it. You're going to do something or a variation of it. So I get you on that, okay? But when you sign for whatever monies, it's a contract. And you don't want to be in breach of that contract, or there's, discipline or penalties for breaching, parts of that contract, okay? And that's even, again, suspension, demotion, termination. All right. So you don't use these terms as weapons. Okay. But you go over the paperwork, and this is why it's very, very important to go over the do's and don't up front. I think when I had the academy, I used the first 10 hours or the first day to go over a disciplinary form and how the things you can get written up on, and progressive discipline. Made it very thorough. So I was like, don't do this, don't do this, do not do that, and don't do this, don't do that. It's progressive discipline when you have to do the same violation or variation of it a few times to actually warrant some type of discipline, okay, in a time period. And then it says, definitely don't do that. That's fireable, okay? So that's one of those, like, you don't do that. So once you go over that and they sign for it, receipts, you hold them accountable. And they put this all in a booklet. Well, it's not even a little booklet, it's a big-ass booklet. And you say, okay, here's all your paperwork. And you make sure you give it to them. They understand it. We call it AKA ACO, or Animal Cruelty Investigator. We call it the Bible. This was passed on to me. All I did was update. Okay, and I think one of my guys now, it's passed on to him. So he actually, he's over it now, and I'm very proud that he's over doing stuff like that and continuing the work. Right, it's not mine. It was passed to me, stuff like that. So with some of these forms, you have a FTO form. So field training officer form. This is when a person's going to be, if they finish the academy work or they're going through an FTO ride along. And how it works is it's a little different. My son puts you in the driver's seat quick. I'm almost the same way. Depends. So if you're supposed to start right along, by the third day, it makes no sense not to have the rookie in the driver's seat. It kind of doesn't. They can kind of get it if you're talking and showing them and teaching them properly. If you're going over whatever paperwork, because there's a transition coming out of any academy. This is law enforcement too. Coming out of any academy and going to the streets is a hell of an adjustment, because you're thinking all schoolwork, and now you're about to apply that to practical use when you go out there in real time. Some things transfer, some things don't. Okay, but all things are under the rules, so you have to be careful in that. So it's no gray area. It's either black or white, and you rather be right, honestly, or you be wrong, so you can learn. The gray area shouldn't be. So FTO forms, I used to have my officers do one on the officer either daily or weekly.